Hi everyone, we are going to have something really special today. I'm going to introduce Audionaut and we'll also go through their E-series speakers. Actually just one concrete E-series speaker, the LX signature, the one that was reviewed in Stereophile. And of course I'm going to review it because Stereophile made measurements. So we are going to look at the measurements and I'll show you a few other things about it and we'll show what makes those speakers special and what kind of sound can you expect from them. But before we go into that, I'm going to introduce Audionaut. It's because no one in the United States, or at least among the circle of my friends, actually nobody knows anything about Audionaut. And Rishi has heard Audionaut gear, but in a non-Audionaut setup, and that's actually not hearing Audionaut at all, because Audionaut is about system synergy. So if anywhere in the world you are and you are thinking about Audionaut, if you have the usual mentality that I'm to get a component, let's say a power cord or a cartridge or a deck or something, and just put it in my system, which is a mixture of other companies and components, then forget about it, because it's not going to work. And now I'm going to take this time which is set aside for this video and explain to you why it will not work. And you will, if you do that, you just get a component, borrow it from a friend or buy it, and you plop it in, then it will perform about less than 5% of what it's capable to perform. So you will get no closer to the Audionaut sound. And now let's go into why does that happen. So to understand Audionaut, we really need to understand the history of audio, of how audio gear were developed. So this is something that you almost never ever hear being said, that whenever a new technology is created in the high-end world, in the audio world, it's never ever about sound quality. It's always a step down, a major step down in sound quality, and the big boost is in convenience. Now let's just quickly review the big fields, the big areas where this happens. So first it happened with the amplification. So over 100 years ago we had triodes, and then in the 40s pentodes were invented and became very quickly popular, and not because they sounded better than the triodes, that they sound much poorer than the triodes, or at least at that time when they was invented their sound was very clearly inferior to triode technology, but they allowed convenience because they give access to high power. While with triodes, if you want high power, you need high voltages and a lot of expense. So Pentode made vacuum tube technology accessible to the mass, basically. And then when transistors were later invented in the 50s and when it became widespread, that was also a huge step down from pentodes, and it took us 70 years of development, basically, so the transistor catch up in quality with the quality of pentodes. And then lately the last invention was the class D amps. If you think back about the inception of class D, the very first class D amps, and even the best class D amps today are better than the weakest transistor amps, but they are a far cry from the best class A transistors. So going from triodes to class D, it's going down on a steep hill in quality. And of course, after the inception, like the class D amps today are much better than the class D amps that came out in the beginning, but their big thing is convenience. So now with this technology we can cram tremendous power into very small size, and it costs next to nothing. So basically it gives us very cheap amplifiers that can be mass produced and put into very tiny places, and we can battery operate a quite powerful amp if we use the class D, and we can never ever think about that in triode. And when you look at the speakers, the same thing happened with the speakers. Just think about the Western Electric horns from 80, 90 years ago, and when the horn technology gave way to hornless technology, so acoustic suspension speakers and other electrodynamic drivers without horns, that's actually a major step down in sound quality, and it took these electrodynamic speakers without horns to develop to an acceptable level. Basically, it happened in the 90s, and until then, it was just a tragedy. Just think back about the majority of the speakers in the 70s, that they were terrible, and because of those terrible speakers, no one really cared about, and no one noticed how transistor technology sucks, how bad it is, because the speakers technology really masked both the potential of audio and also the bad sonic characteristics of transistor amps. And also we can see the same process in the recorded material, how it is recorded. So when vinyl ruled, we had a certain standard. Of course, even at that time they were poor record players, poor turntables and excellent turntables. But when CD came out, that did not even register in the same category as the poorest, weakest, cheapest turntables of the era. Today we have like those $20 turntables that you can buy. I don't even call them turntables. They are jokes. Of course, CDs and digital are much better than that. But if you have like a basic Rega turntable or project or something like that, they absolutely trash the early digital. And since then, digital has gone a very long way, and now it's pretty decent to really fantastic. But it took it a long time, and finally it gave way to streaming. So when we do not have a hard physical media spinning, but we just store the information and convert it directly, and this is the favored, quickly became the favored method, because you don't need to have a record collection. You just stream everything, no hassle. You just push a button and everything is there. But with that, this is a decline in quality. So every single friend of mine reported, when they compare streaming to direct CD playing, streaming doesn't stand a chance. It's kind of like a joke, even if you have the best streamers. And the same thing happened not just in this aspect, but also happened for how music is recorded and produced. We used to have unedited whole sessions, so when the musicians sat down and played together as a band, as one unit, as one heart, as one spirit, and gave all their creativity, and that was recorded. And that's what we can hear. Something that you would actually hear real live. So we are documenting events that happened, and that gave way to heavily processed multi-takes. So when just musicians like record the guitar solo 100 times, and they record the drum solo 100 times, and I go through maybe like 5 singers and put processing on the vocals, da da da, and they tour around with it for half a year, and something comes out. But you never that this we can get an amazing diversity using such recording techniques, which allowed the era of electronic music and very interesting effects. And I'm all for that. It is truly fantastic. But if we want to record, let's say, classical music with this sort of mentality, like we are miking every single performer in an orchestra separately, and then we are trying to adjust the balance, and we try to correct the EQ and all sorts of gizmos and whatnots, then it's going to take a toll, because with this mentality we are not documenting an event, we are creating an artificial reality that never happened in real life. And just altering the recording process, now we have another step. So now with the advent of DSP, we are altering not just the recording process but the playback process as well. So with DSP, now there are companies who use it to correct speakers, so that to match so eventually to EQ basically the drivers, to use DSP instead of a crossover. And that's very enticing, but DSP is basically turning or unleashing very poor digital into the audio world, because most of the DSPs, especially if you look at like subwoofers or woofers or mid-bass couplers, they use Class D amps to drive them, and then the rest of the system is driven by your main amp. So basically you will be hearing the poor Class D quality, and that sort of thing is infused in your reproduction. And the bad thing with it is that it allows the use of any kind of drivers, so you can match it to whatever parameters you want them to match to. So it's basically almost like rescuing a car crash or a birth defect, and you just use DSP, and from a wrecked car you get a car that looks like a shiny new car, but it's still a car wreck. And if you are a speaker designer, I design them for myself, for my own enjoyment. My philosophy is when I design speakers, I want to design them as functional cars, so or as functional units, so you do not need to put correction. So correct it before you implement it into practice, and do not design something that's deficient and you use another deficient technology to make it work. That's just absurd. But it's really fancy, it's really high-tech, it catches the imagination of young people and opens people's wallets. And for sure, this method allows us to ultimately get very high speaker volumes for relatively less money, and in addition, if you are a good engineer, you know how to use DSP, it's much faster to design speaker with slapping on DSP compared to designing proper speakers. Designing proper speakers takes years, decades, and if you slap something onto DSP, you can be done in a few months with the design process. So this is just part of our inflation in values, so that how quality turns into quantity. So if you're going for quantity, which is like loudness and fast sales, fast production, then this is what we need. And of course today the audio world is governed by markets and market prices and demands, and of course speaker manufacturers are moving towards this way because they need to sell their product, and people just go for flashy things. There's almost negligible amount of us who buy with our ears. Most people buy with what they see in the ads, and if something was reviewed very favorably, then they believe that must sound really, really good. So people put their votes, their money with those designs which are very fashionable. And the madness of the madness now is that room acoustics are also corrected with DSP, so instead of having a proper room, we just EQ it out. But that doesn't work either, because you are introducing CASD or digital into the mix, and you cannot correct a room. How room correction works, it corrects it into a single spot. So it means that if you do this method, you are going to have a more clear, more precise presentation for a single position. But it means that you have to sit in your chair upright. And if someone else sits there who is shorter or taller than you, they are already not at the correct position. You have to re-EQ the DSP for them. And if they don't know how to do that, or maybe your family wants to enjoy it, or friends, then going higher or lower will have already poor performance. Or if you move a little bit sideways, or even yourself, if you slouch a little bit because you've been listening to music for half an hour and you want to just get relaxed and be comfy, you cannot do that with DSP. It's a really screwed up thing. It would work if it would be real time and it would follow the listener's head. So as you move your head, the DSP adjusts to that position to correct for that exact location. But because this is not happening, it's a really painful experience. I have experienced it a few times, and I do not like what I hear, because as soon as you go out, and it just takes just a few inches, even an inch, you go off center, DSP doesn't work there. So basically, during the past century of audio history, of audio development, we always, every single technology, every single methodology followed this path. We took down the stairs couple steps, like 3 steps down and 4 steps up. So development of audio was not straight up. So like we had a certain quality, and then we had better, and we got today. This is the impression that you get when you are just a consumer and you are going with ads, and the companies tell you, oh, my speakers are the best speakers, highest technology, best bang for the buck, $2 million, I give it to you, 5% discount, yeah, perfect. But those $10 million speakers or whatever, they were not developed from the best of the, they do not come from the best lineage. They are just compromises, and that's the bad thing, is that everything went down a couple of steps and then a couple of steps up. So now, what would have happened if we went straight up the whole time? So imagine if you had the triode technology, and instead of going down to pentodes, transistors, we would have just taken the triode technology and improved it, and kept on improving it and poured in like billions of dollars into triode technology, which is how much money was poured into transistor technology, and even more. Just imagine all that massive, incredible development, those millions of hours of design put into triodes instead of transistors. Audio technology would be completely beyond off the charts today. However, that could not have happened because triode technology was too expensive in the era. So we needed transistor technology to make amplifiers affordable, to have a kind of shift in what we can produce to make audio affordable for everyone. And in the meanwhile, triode technology became affordable as well, because all the extra developments that happened in the meanwhile, like improved transformer technology, improved capacitor technology, that allowed triode technology to improve. So what if we went up the whole time? So there were some people in audio history. I call these the unseen audio heroes. Imagine that they are the X-Men or Superman. So these people are the Superman of audio, mostly the unseen Superman, those who did not swim with the mainstream current, but these are those guys who went back to the inception of audio, went back to the best technologies, and they developed it. And imagine that there's like a few voices like them who worked, who returned to it, and how much they achieved compared to the mainstream, who had like thousands of companies, billions of dollars invested, millions of man hours went into it, and really they can barely compete against these lonely voices. So Jean Hiraga, he was many consider him that he's responsible for the return of the triodes, of the direct heated triodes to our age. So in the 70s, he started playing around with 300B tubes. He built his 300B amp that caused a major uproar in the world of audio, because it just showed that how shitty transistor technology of the era was, and what sort of treasure did we forget in the past and buried it. Susumu Sakuma, he also played around with triodes and direct heated tubes, and he was a huge proponent of mono reproduction. He created some amazing pieces of art. And now we are getting to Audionaut waters. Hiroyasu Kondo was the man who founded Audionaut, Condo Sun, and basically he think he's the one who really is responsible of creating a big impact, because it's thanks to him that that triode amplifiers became a worldwide known phenomena. So it was his Ongaku amplifier that really crashed into the Western market, crashed into the US market, and really put the eye of the audio industry onto triodes. And while with John Hiraga and Sakuma, they were just they draw attention from audio fans in Japan and France, but they did not arouse the interest of the audio industry. Kondo-san did, and as you remember, his Ongaku amplifier was the most expensive amplifier of its era in the 80s. And then the fourth person, Peter Kottrup, he first was the dealer of Kondo amplifiers, but he became more involved with it, and he started designing his own products, own amplifiers, own other parts, and he had the permission from Kondo-san to use the Audionaut name. And there was a complicated history of Audionaut, and basically now there is Audionaut Japan and Audionaut non-Japan. So Audionaut Japan was Kondo-san, he already passed away, and Audionaut non-Japan is Peter Kottrup. And now let's see, so this is Kondo-san, and he did not follow the musical trend at all. So he just went back and looked at triode amps, direct heated triode amps, and he was not interested on creating an artificial reality on fake sound, but he wanted just to get pure music out of the system. And he had lots of ideas which were groundbreaking ideas at the time. For example, using silver as conductor, and I call that a magic link, because that introduces in my opinion a whole different level of reality into the sound. So anyway, that's for another day. But he also, another hallmark that he did was using low output moving coil cartridges, and that's like really low output. So when we think about low output, we think like a millivolt level or less than a millivolt. He went down to 100 microvolt levels, so that's really low even by today's standards. So this is his famous Ongaku amplifier, and this is where we are going to continue with the Ongaku. So for now we are going to take a break, and that will be part 2. Thank you for watching.